Hello there, and welcome to Pace Weitkamp Media. I'm Pace Weitkamp, and this week I have a very special interview that I'm extremely excited to conduct. For this week's interview, I have cinematographer and director Andrew Wonder. Andrew has worked with a ton of big industry names and has produced some incredible solo work. Most notably, he created the short film Undercity, which has eclipsed 3.8 million views on YouTube and took the Urbex community by storm. Andrew has also been working on some notable solo work, most recently Feral, which premiered at the 2019 Sarasota Film Festival. Andrew is an awesome guy, and I'm very, very excited to conduct this interview. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy it.
Went down, so we haven't made it back to New York yet.
Gotcha.
So I'm here.
Are you at least able to have a nice place to stay while you're there, or you just?
It's I feel like I'm calling it like an oasis. It's we live, my partner Colleen, who's also a production designer who I work with, and we we live together in New York, and we have an apartment. It's a nice apartment, but it's still an apartment on the fifth floor with a lot of people around it in a city that unfortunately is wounded pretty badly right now.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
And so we were here in Houston on a shoot, about to do a commercial Friday the 13th when, the plug got pulled on the world. It was our last day of prep. We were going to shoot the next day, and our shoot got pulled. Hopefully it'll start up again eventually, but we're lucky. We rented a beautiful house down here. We got a little yard. It's sunny. And so, it just seemed like hopefully we'll wait it out.
Yeah, that's awesome though. I mean, being able to get away from that city, at least you weren't stuck in New York during all this. That would have been terrible.
It's hard. It's, you have a home, you know what it's like. It's,
right.
I was born there. I've spent my whole life there. I've lived other places for short stints, and I always make it back there. And it's weird for the first time to have New York feel like a place to worry about going back to. It's never been that way in my life before. So
yeah, of course.
It's a lot of emotions. It's weird feeling about New York right now, but I'm grateful. I'm in a good situation. We're calm. We're safe. Headspace is good. What else can you ask for, right?
Right. That's good, man. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here again, man. I'm glad that we were able to get this going after so long. It's awesome.
Oh, I'm grateful.
Able to do it over Zoom too.
Yeah, I'm grateful we finally got to do this. I was sad when it didn't work out shaking your hand in person in October.
Right.
And but I'm glad you got to go to that festival. But yeah, I wish we could have been there. But I'm happy to do it now. It's nice to finally meet you.
You too, Andrew. Thank you so much for being here again. So for people who aren't really aware, do you mind kind of introducing yourself? Just who you are and kind of that sort of thing?
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wonder, and I'm a filmmaker, born and raised in New York, and now I go wherever the world lets me discover.
That's awesome, man. All right, so you're from New York originally. What kind of was your life early on as just being, are you from the city?
I'm the product of a Brooklyn Queens marriage, which are two of the boroughs outside of Manhattan. Yep. So, there aren't too many places you could go with that combination. So a little bit between Long Island and the city growing up, but always in that area. Grew up in just, regular town. I loved math as a kid. I was never really good at anything. I remember the most influential thing I think my mother ever said to me was when I was in about 5th grade. She asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I said I wanted to be a jack of all trades. I wanted to be good at everything. And she told me then I would always fail and never be good at anything. And it stuck with me for a long time. And, I never felt good at anything. I never, high school, middle school, I've met them. I know them. I work with them. There's some people who want to do what they want to do from when they're 5 or 6 or 7, but I wasn't one of them. I wanted to be a cultural anthropology, scientist, that was gender studies. Yeah.
I was going to harp on where did that come from? The cultural anthropologist idea.
I reflect on it now. It's funny. I'm 34 years old, and I started working in film when I was 17 for MTV, and it was like plus minus a week or two. It was exactly 17 years ago. So it's weird. I'm a math brain, so in my head it's weird. I've now lived just as much of my life since I first picked up a camera to the time I spent without one, and now I'll spend more of my life with a camera in my hand than I did without, which is a weird, It's
Right.
weird. It's a weird feeling. It's a nice one, but it's a weird one. But I was interested in social science research. I was always a curious person, just how things work, how people work. I
Gotcha.
always liked people. And I don't know, it was a science track at school. I loved it. I loved survey. I was at that point, what I was really interested in was like early developmental social hierarchy. So like there are these guys, Kohlberg and Piaget and Erickson, and I used to study them, and then like social hierarchies. I loved it all, but it's science is hard, you know,
Yeah,
and
of course. It's
it
one of the
was,
most difficult subjects out there. There's
it
still some that
wasn't
don't know.
the, yeah, it wasn't the fun and games I expected it to be. So when I did theater in high school. Again, I wasn't really good at anything. I'd made a couple of short films. I wasn't good at sports. I didn't even feel like I had friends in the theater kids.
Yeah.
I was kind of an outcast at that point. And when I was 17, I got the call from MTV. They had a show at the time called Made that went on for a long time. And they were doing a reunion show with the kids from the first season. This was going to be the beginning of the second, and they wanted a young person to make it. And I was in high school at the time. They had a college student who was about to do it and dropped out because he didn't want to be he didn't want to be stuck in reality,
Right.
which was a different, it was a different time. And I jumped, and it was funny. I was a kid from Long Island. I had never really left home. I'd never really seen any of the world. I didn't even eat a vegetable till I was 20. We ate red sauce Italian my whole
Yeah, of
life.
course. Yeah, growing up in New York,
And at
of
then
course.
17, it was the end of my senior year of high school, and suddenly I was 10 weeks on the road. I lived with Amish people in Ohio. I got hogtied at a rodeo in Washington State. I went to a prom in New Jersey. I met an opera singer upstate New York. I met all these people who've been through the process, but I was 17. I didn't know anything. I
Right.
didn't know how anything worked. I had no training. I wasn't self-taught even yet. And so it was interesting because at that time, like this, like verite, one-man band reality TV documentary was new. The idea that you had a camera and you recorded your own audio and you directed and you produced and you
Exactly.
made content, it was a new concept. And I was very lucky. I was very young learning it. I hadn't learned anything, and there were people 10 years older than me who were showing me, they had to decide what edit system to teach me, how to
Right.
show me how to use a camera. I had a series producer. I had to meet with executives and get notes and get rejected. And I don't know, it changed my life.
Yeah.
No one had ever given me that much responsibility, and no one had ever given me the chance to use my voice, and no one had ever really given me the chance to leave home and discover myself. And it was like finding my paintbrush, and I
Right.
I never went back.
So going on that, I mean, were you feeling at the time that this was a lot of responsibility for you to take on at this time, or were you just like raring to go, like, let's do this, man? Like, I'm going to do this my way, and I'm going to get it done. I mean, what kind of were you thinking initially?
Oh, I was way too young in that dumb way to be able to think about any of that. I was just I was just basically panicked for 10 weeks. I remember it. I would say all right, the biggest lesson. It was hard because I'd have to go release a school, or I went to a high school with like 200 kids a year in it, and I'd have to go to a high school with 5,000 kids and
Yeah,
find the
man.
kid. And they would keep throwing challenges at me. So you wouldn't really have a lot of time to think because you were making a film, you had a deadline. It's just
Of
like it
course.
is now. It's probably the closest, between that phase and doing commercial, the closest experience I had to the work I do now was probably the first one I had at 17. And so there was a lot, and I was just trying to survive, but I did learn something really valuable. I think the thing from it that probably sticks with me most to this day is pretty simple, which was, so a movie's a little different, right? A movie, you have a script. So you generally, and you film things that aren't in the script all the time. Someone's standing by a tree and there's a butterfly and it's beautiful. You get a shot, you try to
Right.
make it into a scene. But for the most part, it's like the person wakes up, a challenge happens, then at the end they get it or they don't.
Yes.
Documentaries, reality, for good reasons and for bad reasons are a little bit different. You kind of never know where things will fit, but you have to know the question you have to answer. And so, I would be in these situations. I'd have no money. I had no crew. I had no people. I had people watching me work and filming me work, but I had to do it. And what I really learned, and it helps me, it's probably my core principle still today, is just if you don't have money, if you don't have crew, if you don't have resources, you always have emotion. And even if you're alone with the camera, you can always find emotion just by listening. I feel like most people spend too much time shooting with their eyes instead of with their ears and their heart. Because if you just listen and you're just open, I mean, if you're at a dinner table with 4 people deciding who to shoot, you have to get good at figuring out who's going to speak next.
Right.
And I think those were the skills that I think, and being so young and my brain still so unformed, it was my first real job. It was my first real anything. And so that lesson really stuck, because you'll shoot 200 hours of footage for an episode, 300 hours sometimes, and then it was tape. So that's 200 tapes. And I'll shoot a scene of, let's say, you and your mom talking. I'll shoot a scene. And I don't know where it's going to go, but they paid me for the day to shoot this scene. So I better make sure the scene can go somewhere if we
you got to
need
make
it.
sure
And
it's something good that's going to reflect what you're trying to do for this episode or whatever project you're doing.
Because we would be writing, we would be rewriting, we'd be shooting, we'd be planning, we'd be coming up ideas, and it would all be happening in real time as we were making the episode.
Right.
And so I made this documentary a few years ago called Seed, and we shot, I think, 500 hours, and we had 3 months to get it ready for South by Southwest. And we went through the process. And, when you have that much footage and you're shooting just everything around you, you don't get to watch it all.
Right.
Like, I've done so many projects where I've never seen all the footage just because how could you?
Right.
And so it's a weird gambit when you shoot scenes like that, because no one may ever look at it, but if they do, it has to work.
Right. Yeah. It has to work no matter what. It has to be unanimous for the film, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how long after this job at MTV, whenever you're getting all these kind of life experiences and extracurricular stuff, did you decide to enroll at a film school at NYU?
Well, with a place like NYU, it's never you that decides.
Okay, gotcha.
Which my dream was to go to Duke. I wanted to be a North Carolina boy. I wanted to go live in Narnia and eat 25-cent chicken wings and live in Hogwarts and learn about how people work in anthropology and gender studies and maybe make movies. I had a very different image.
Yeah.
I also, at that point, I was writing plays. There's an organization in New York called Young Playwrights Incorporated. Have you ever heard of Stephen Sondheim? He did Into the Woods. You would know him. He's done music.
The last name sounds familiar. I probably never heard his first name, but that last name 100% sounds
Sondheim.
familiar. Yes.
And so he had an organization in New York that helped under 21 playwrights produce and do workshops.
Oh, that's great.
And I had, if I ever get a chance to thank the world, if I ever get to be on stage, if I ever get to, say thank you, the people I feel don't get thanked enough are teachers.
Of course.
And especially elementary school teachers in general. But in my life, it was the art teachers I had. If I hadn't had art programs, if I hadn't had music, if I hadn't been given stuff to draw with, if I hadn't been taught to sing in elementary school and high school, I don't know who I'd be. I was so lucky. Again, jack of all trades, good at nothing. When I entered middle school, there was theater, and I did the middle school plays, and I found a way to express, to build, to transform.
Yeah.
And the teachers, Miss Sussin, who was my middle school drama teacher, and Mr. Schrader, who was my high school drama teacher, they were very supportive of me at a time where, not a lot of people were in my life, and it made a big difference. And, Mr. Schrader was the one who got me hooked up with young playwrights. He introduced me to a playwright. He read my work. He would edit it for me. He would send me to people. And there was a workshop with these young playwright people. You had to like win a contest again, and I never win contests, so I never won it. And I just called them every day. I kept emailing the woman, and eventually I got to go, and I got to go to these workshops. I used to see like 3 plays a week. And so I was starting to get interested in the arts. So about then, I thought about applying to NYU. I didn't know whether to be a film student. Should I do theater? Should I do writing? I honestly didn't feel like I connected with a lot of people I wrote plays with. So I was hoping the film people would be better.
Mm-hmm.
I applied to NYU. I was waitlisted, and I also called them every day for a month. And
Check in and
eventually,
be like, hey, I want to come to your school and that kind of thing.
essentially, Megan Minato, I believe her name was, in admissions. And I would call her. Then eventually she called me up and said, Andrew, you could stop, your pack will be there in 2 weeks.
Stop bothering
It
us.
wasn't,
Bring it to the school. We got you.
it wasn't what I expected film school. I don't think it was I don't know. It's interesting. It's hard. I think we all have to look back at our lives and rectify some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I went. There are lessons I learned there, and I was able to take, to achieve and work in film because I was there. But I just wanted to work. I had that MTV experience. I thought college was going to be like Highlander. I thought we'd be chopping off each other's heads to make a film. And I was ready to go. I had been picked on my whole life. I'd never been good at anything. I was always a lone wolf without a lot of friends. And so I felt like, I was going, I was ready for film school. And I got there, but no one else was. Everyone wanted to kind of hang out, learn things to make movies. That was the energy. I'm sure not all film schools are like that. I'm sure not even all groups at NYU were like that. But where I ended up, it was like that.
But do you think, despite being at such a prestigious school, because of all the stuff you were doing outside of it, did it not really fulfill your needs as a director to get you to the next step? Or were you still being able to learn things, but it wasn't really suiting your needs completely?
Oh, that's good. What to reveal?
Yeah, don't say anything that'll incriminate you, but just,
I think there's a really dangerous phrase that we've lived with our entire lives, which is do unto others as you would do unto yourself. And I think it's dangerous because I don't think it actually applies to how we as individuals and we as a society, we work, because the truth is we all need love and we need different things and we speak different languages and our hearts require different motivation. And so I think it's different for everyone.
Right.
Colleen, my partner, she didn't finish college and she is the most capable, quickest to learn person I know. It just, the structure of it didn't help her learn.
Right. You can't generalize every single person's experience into a school.
For me, it gave me the ability to get on set. The classrooms were not, some of them would fulfill me, some of them wouldn't, like any college, but it got me on set. The first set I could get on, I remember it was a music video for a guy called The Gay Pimp. I made $50. I held a boombox and a bounce card on Gay Street in the West Village of New York for this little music video that would play in Europe. And that was my first job in film. It was my first free job at NYU. I worked on this film shoot, and I remember they had all the lighting gels and they had all the expendables. They had all the gaffer's tape. And I walked to my dorm, all the way from the bottom of Manhattan to the Village with trash bags full of gels. There was all, and when I got on set, I just fell in love. I fell in love. I had done my stuff alone at MTV, but I'd never been in the team environment of a film set. And I loved it. And I quickly became a camera assistant. I loved it. At them, it was film. I was the last class at NYU fully taught film. I was the cusp. After the years after me, they were phasing out film every year. So people I knew a year younger than me had different classes than I did. because we were the end of a traditional film education, which is so valuable. And so I just wanted to get on set. I worked on 50 sets my first semester of freshman year.
It's crazy.
For free. I worked on 50 of them. I worked on another 50. By the end of my freshman year of college, I was shooting people's films. I mean, at that point, I wasn't shooting like Star Wars. I was shooting, like
you were
I was
just
shooting
yearning for experience. You were just, like trying to do as much.
I was shooting,
as possible.
yeah, someone who didn't have a DP like 3 days before the shoot, but I knew it enough. I remember my first time DPing. I had been ACing forever, and I looked into the viewfinder of the camera, setting up the first shot, and I realized I had never looked through the viewfinder before, and that I had no idea what any of the lines.
Oh my gosh!
And I just didn't know.
Because were you just all doing kind of mentally framing beforehand? You weren't really utilizing that tool? Or?
I was the assistant. I pulled focus. I was the camera assistant. I loaded the film and I set up. It's like. Making like feral was a big lesson in that. There's been a lot of them. There's certain things in life you can only learn by doing, right?
Right.
Like I could watch someone play Fortnite all day. That's not going to make me better at Fortnite. You know what I mean?
You actually get to control yourself and start building and doing whatever else. Like, yeah.
I'm in my day 3 of training on Fortnite, so I'm starting to get better. And I'm building a new camera rig that uses a PS4 controller to operate the whole rig. Wow. And I realized I don't know how to use a video game controller, so I'm teaching myself Fortnite.
So it's a learning process throughout. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. But I don't know, all that stuff. I love to work. I was shooting by the end of my freshman year. I was working on features by my sophomore year. I was in the union. I was a union camera assistant by my junior year. I worked on Law and Order. I would load film. I was teaching, then was the digital revolution. I was teaching like ACs and these great DPs, great, like amazing, like my heroes. I was teaching them video cameras because no one had used them before. And I was teaching them. And so I rose up really quickly on set because I had a passion and a curiosity for something that no one had. Everyone wanted to shoot film. Everyone do it the old way. And I had spent 10 weeks on the road with mini DV with these little tapes, and I was shooting, and it was just, you still can't convince me that all the people and all the stuff and all the waiting gives you a better product. Yeah. If anything, the journey of my last 17 years has been figuring out what's the middle ground. How do you get a little more production value without suffocating the discovery? But that's what I worked on set. I rose up very quickly. I would still work for MTV, but that's my college life was on set. I shot my first feature while I was still in college. It was in New Orleans right after Katrina.
Right. Yeah,
premiered at South by.
Yeah, I had that in my notes.
All that.
Yeah.
All that was when I was, that one's a crazy one. I had AC'd for this great director, Michael Amareda. He was a guy who was a hero of mine for a long time, and a producer. I'd worked on a movie. The only class I failed at NYU, I failed because I missed the final to go to the wrap party of the first feature I ever worked on. And it was there and if I hadn't gotten to that party, I wouldn't have gotten my first feature. You never know. And what's funny? The guy who failed me, I'm in the Directors Guild. I'm in the DGA. I see him all the time. He's on the council. So he doesn't recognize me, but he failed me. I always want to say to him, like, because he was one of the best teachers I ever had, Gary Donatelli. So what a brilliant teacher. I just failed this class. And, but I had AC'd on a movie. Then Michael was trying to make a movie in New Orleans right after Katrina. They didn't know what it was. It was almost, I swear it was almost the first Mumblecore movie. It was like right on the cusp of that technology. Because I'm waiting for my FedEx delivery, sorry. And, but and I was in the Central Park Zoo. It was my first days off in a while. And the DP, Scotty Miller, who was prepping the movie, called me up. He called me and he said, Andrew, he kept calling me like, we're going to start next week. He's like, maybe you'll come down here. What camera do we need? And I was helping him. But then I didn't hear anything for like a month. I got a call. Andrew, I'm getting evicted from my apartment. I have to leave. If you get down here right now, I bet you can shoot the movie. And I just literally, I left the zoo. I went home. I had a little battery. I had the first battery powered LED light at the time then, the light paddle. Uh, and I grabbed my case with the two of them. I grabbed a backpack of clothes, and I got on a plane to New Orleans. I canceled all these trips. I almost missed the beginning of my senior year of college for it, or almost had to extend my college. But I thought I would be there for 2 weeks. I'd never get the job. I ended up there for months.
Wow.
Probably one of the more defining experiences. It was a tough one.
And you were working as the cinematographer on this film, correct?
Yes. I was, I don't know. It was funny, at MTV, we didn't have directors. You were a producer shooter.
Right.
Like no one ever took the title. I think it was because of unions, but no one ever had the title. And so you never really, I never really thought about directing. I shot, I was just so happy to express, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
It didn't matter. I could have been pulling focus or doing sound. I would do lighting one day. I used to, Cary Fukunawa, he's doing the new James Bond movie. He directed it. He also did True Detectives.
Oh, okay.
He directed that. What are the other movies he's done? He was in the grad school when I was in the undergrad, and I used to camera assist for him. And I used to go on shoots and watch guys like him work, and you would see these people, and I would just learn because I was like 19.
Griffin. Sorry about that.
I just wanted, no. I wanted to learn anything, and I loved it. And I look back now and I see, this guy, Harris Savides, the cinematographer who I think most changed me. And, I only spent a handful of days with him, and he passed away. And
oh man,
I still get sad about him every day. It's funny. The film's funny. The people you meet, someone 10 days of your life, 5 days of your life.
Right, you just didn't want to shoot or something, but they had such a big impact on you.
I taught him video cameras. Harris Savides. He shot a lot of Gus Van Sant movies, a lot of Mark Romanek videos, a lot of stuff you would have seen. And he was doing it was one of my three mentors. It would be Francis Lyons, who was the one who trained me at MTV. It was Harris, who is that cinematographer, Harris Savides, who was the first one who was I really think the first one to go you're doing weird shit and I like it.
Right.
Which was, when you're 20, 21, it's the thing you pray for most in the world every night is someone just to like who you are and what you're trying to do.
Right. Yeah.
And to get that was such a miracle at that age. It really, I think, especially from him, I think that stamp, has saved me so many times throughout my life. Then the other one is Paul Schrader, who I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah, I saw that when I was doing my research for this and everything. I saw that name. It's one of those things that also sounds familiar, but he seems like he's been doing some pretty incredible work and has done incredible work in the past.
Yeah, he wrote Taxi Driver. I mean, it's crazy.
Wrote Taxi Driver?
Yeah, and he's directed American Gigolo. He's directed some amazing movies. He directed this movie. It's so beautiful. It's on Criterion if you can find it, called Mishima.
Mishima?
George Lucas used the sequels for Star Wars to pay for it. And Warner Brothers paid for half of it, and the Toho company paid for half of it, and the movie didn't exist. No one, but it's beautiful. And I was Paul's assistant. I quit shooting after college. I worked on a music video. It was early YouTube, and this rapper threatened to kill me and my family, and there was all this stuff. And it was my third day working for Paul. I had to go to court about it. It was crazy.
Oh my gosh.
And learned a lot of lessons about pride on that one. And but then I quit it all and I started working as Paul's assistant. That's when I really started directing. It really wasn't and I say all this stuff just because I think, like we were saying about college, it's really easy, I feel, to make the mistake to think there's a path.
Yeah.
But thinking there's a path, that kind of narrative, that type of thinking about your life is what let people like Harvey Weinstein prey on weak people.
Yeah.
I really believe that. It's those narratives, and I didn't know I would end up here. I did the parts, there was pain in the rest of my life, and I did the only things I could to nourish me, the only things to make me feel safe or to feel like my feelings meant something to the world. And I just did it any way anyone would let me until eventually it turned into my career.
Until you, you didn't really, I guess, this is kind of hard to phrase, but you weren't really in control, but then all this accumulated to you being in control after school and you baking your own stuff. Like you were able to study under all these great people and learn so much, and then it kind of culminated to you now being this out of school person. You're creating your own stuff, and you already have so much experience under your belt.
Well, I also have a very simple approach, which I think helps. I know what I love. I love to discover. I'm not here to, I can do a oneer. Like I've done it all day. Like I've done all these tricks. I know how to use the crane shots. It doesn't impress me. It's like, with enough people in prep, you can do anything. And with computers, you can now create anything. There's nothing there. Where's the achievement?
Where's the human? Yeah. Where's
it's if Russia already made it to the moon, who cares if we get there? And we're in a brand, I've been waiting for this for over a decade, and it's finally happening, and we're at the greatest opportunity in filmmaking, I think, to ever hit us. It started with digital, and it took 10 years for it to take hold, but it's once in a generation do people get an opportunity to take our myths, our collective of myths from thousands of years, and re-envision them for today's age.
Right.
And we've been living with the ghost of what Paul Schrader and his generation did in the 70s. We've been living with the Xeroxes of their myths. Like, have you ever seen a high school movie that didn't just look like a John Hughes movie?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's all the same insular, like, bullshit movie universe.
Right, you just get the formula, you get that formula down, and you keep repeating it for the masses, and that's how a lot of cinema has turned to these days.
And it's logical, and it makes sense. And listen, I watch it, I like it, but it's not going to get the ball down the field. And I've given my life to get the ball down the field since I was 17, and I will continue to until it's there. And it'll never be there, but I don't care. And all these things, I did it all. Most of the things I did, it wasn't just to learn from people. It was, I feel, I look back at my early 20s, and most situations I wish I would have spoken less, and not been so strong-willed. Yeah, it's good advice. It's good advice. If anyone's getting that advice, listen to it. I didn't. But, it wasn't, I was pretty combative in those days, not in a bad way. I was just lucky I was young. I was going up against guys who were like 40, 50 years old and throwing punches at them,
Right.
So it was a little bit different that way. That's what was fun. Like Harris and I think that's what gave me so much confidence so quickly, is that I never, for better or worse, I was always so goal focused that it wasn't about learning. It was about gaining something.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found someone, it was more about sparring with them for me at those points. Like Harris and I used to just have pissing contests. Like he would be like, "Oh, on American Gangster, we use this lens," and I'd be like, "Why do you use that lens? Use this one." And we would just argue all day. And I would build something from Toys R Us. I remember the first thing he bought it from it that day. I took a video camera from Toys R Us, and I modified it to be infrared to shoot the special way, and I brought it to set, and he bought one from Toys R Us that day to mod himself. I was so, at that time, I was so lucky because I got to have those types of relationships with people. And those are the relationships that, made me who I am.
Right. So
and
I'm
grateful.
This environment, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, please.
Would you say this environment would you say this environment is like, it was competitive, but it was like healthily competitive? Like you were still learning so much, but you were kind of going toe to toe and being like, "Hey, I'm this way, you're this way." Like, was it combative, but did it work? Were you learning a lot?
I was learning a lot because I was always solving problems.
Okay.
I wasn't sitting there with a notebook, but I was like, I had a job to do. I was always on set. Set's a great place to learn because the thing has to get over there in an hour or else you can't shoot. And so, it's funny. I look back. I always thought of myself as an ambitious person. And I look back and I realized that a lot of what I thought was ambition was actually anxiety. And I spent years letting my anxiety be my fuel. And you know what? It's good fuel. I mean, most of the world runs off of it. It
Right.
makes you tense, it makes you focus, but it's like caffeine or sugar. It's poison in that way too. It makes you second guess, it makes you
Right.
tight,
Yeah.
it
Oh
makes you
yeah.
react. And I've let go a lot of it. I've done a lot of work to find my peace and find my happiness. And I have to say, it was funny. I was just talking to, there's this great animator I work with, an actor and filmmaker, Emily Kaplan. We were just talking about this, and because ambition can be your fuel, anxiety can be your fuel,
Yeah.
but it's the dark side. It's Star Wars stuff. It's poison. It's poison
Right.
you let into
Yeah.
your heart.
You gotta
And
let it. Yeah.
the moments in life and the moments on set where I learned the most were the moments where my heart was the most open because I didn't have fear. And at that age, when I was 19, like I can't, I would be scared to list some of the clients who have fired me throughout
Right.
my career. Clients who I direct for now who fired me as camera assistants then, things like that.
Yeah.
It's wild. Like, I messed up at my job in every single way. I said the wrong thing. I broke the piece. I didn't check it out right. I did all those things while getting employed. And so the consequence was always not eating or
Yeah.
not having money. And
Right.
so it was, and I realize now, if you asked me 10 years ago if I would have said it was competitive, I would have said yes. But that was because I was making it competitive, because I thought if it was competitive that there'd be an end point.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Competition makes you think, if I get to the mountain, but there is no mountain. I thought when I booked my first commercial, I'd be it, but I still couldn't get a second commercial. I thought
Yeah.
when I did my first car campaign, I'd get it. I thought when I had my first TV show, I thought when I finished my first feature, I thought when I had my first film in a festival, but none of those things, you still have to wake up and poop the next day.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not like,
Yeah. Life goes back to normal. It's not. Yeah.
and so the more that I have let go of those things as values, and the more that I focused on just the achievement and the process.
Mhm.
I just want to discover something you haven't seen, and that's it. It's simple. It's impossible to do, but a simple goal. And so now it's not competitive. It's not this. It's not that. It's just, is this going to give me an opportunity to discover? If yes, I go for it. If no, I just don't even bother with it
Right.
anymore.
So I guess, so similar to that, this is kind of the meat of this interview, I guess, before we kind of speak on Feral and the project, The Great Fair, that you have coming up as well. Don't worry,
Please.
this is going to be edited and released later on, so we're not going to spill too much information. But I wanted to transition.
Take your time and no worries.
I wanted to transition to talking about Undercity. Undercity is how I first
Yeah.
discovered you. I found that video on YouTube and absolutely loved it. It's at 3.8 million views and counting. It was an absolute smash hit. So can you kind of explain and introduce what Undercity is for people who don't know?
Well, thank you for those kind words, and thank you
dude, it's
for
incredible.
following me. And as a shout out, you've been such a great supporter, and it has given me a lot of light throughout the past year. So I appreciate it.
Dude,
and
no problem.
All your kindness towards these projects and these things. And Undercity was an accident.
Really?
Like all great things. All great things are accidents. Anyone who can tell you, there's a reason why you watch a bunch of formulaic TV, and every once in a while, it's only every once in a while a movie punches you in the dick. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's because there's a magic in the air, and I've been spending all these years trying to figure out, what helps motivate that magic. But Undercity, for your listeners, is a 27-minute documentary about the world beneath New York City, the tunnels, the sewers, the mole people.
Yep.
That somehow, for a 27-minute movie, 2/3 of people finish. Which is the greatest stat I could ever dream of in the internet
People
age.
aren't just clicking off of it; they're watching this thing thoroughly and enjoying it. You're right.
They're watching like 18 minutes of it. That's crazy. Right. Which is a shame, because the ending, we go up the bridge and it's great.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
But I, that was a film. Growing up in New York, how can you not be mystified by the subways? I was a Ninja Turtle kid. I was almost held back in first grade because of the Ninja Turtles. And because they thought I couldn't read, but in reality, I didn't want to read anything without a Ninja Turtle.
Oh
You
my
know, the sewers, you know, you grow up and it's the sewers, the subway tunnels, and it was always magic. And there's this movie, this old horror movie called Chud. Have you ever heard of it?
No. No.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Oh my gosh.
And John Goodman is a great John Goodman death scene in it. It's a lot of New York places. It's basically like a photographer on the Bowery and the homeless people who live in the tunnels because the EPA is dumping toxic waste down there. They're becoming cannibalistic zombies.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to watch that. That sounds awesome.
It's a great movie. And I liked it. And I always thought there was magic to it. And I've always thought that when you're trying to make something with suspense or fear, like if a snake is coming at me to kill me, that's scary. But the second it eats my face, I'm dead. It doesn't matter anymore. But if I thought a snake was coming at me, and then at the last second, it eats my best friend next to me, that's the most terrifying thing I can ever think of.
Right.
Because now I'm just waiting to die. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Hoping to escape. And so that's always been my theory on suspense. And as a director, if I were going to take the toolbox and make it into one tool, I would say as a director, the only decision you have to make, you know, if you only going to make one and you're stuck, you're going to make one decision as a director. All you have to decide is what is the emotional distance that you need to put between your audience and your subject. Just think about our conversation. You know, all this video chatting is set up to make it feel like we're across a table from each other.
Yeah.
But, you know, this is a different conversation. And so is me across the room.
Right.
If I talk to you from across the street, and emotionally, they're different. One feels like I'm in your face. One of them feels like I'm at the dinner table, and the other one feels like I'm yelling at you from across the street.
Yeah.
So
and
most
each one
of
has
my
its usage, but it's not like, I mean, you have to have that certain thing for each purpose.
But, you know, if someone is telling you their heartfelt story, you know, each one of those three positions tell it differently.
Yeah.
The second feature I ever shot, the Jonestown Defense, I tried this theory. I had two cameras, this EX1s. One of them, I'm always the getting punched in the face guy. Like I used to, I got embedded with the DEA. I used to do drug raids in Utah with the cartels. Like,
Wow.
You know, I was underground for a while. Like I love that. Like it's just like shooting B-roll or houses make me want to shoot myself. You know, like I want to be in it with people.
Right,
so that's me.
Grit. You want to be in the grit of it.
Yeah. And then I brought a friend who loves to pick off stuff from afar. And we shot the whole film with neither of us talking to each other, but just us just shooting what we shot. And it was amazing in the edits because just by changing that position, you could midline make a scene feel completely different. Because if you and I are talking close like this, and then suddenly I cut back to the distance, it feels like something changed.
You're like, what the hell just, what was that? Right.
So that's an early precursor to all this, to where all this began. So I've been playing around with those theories since college, and testing them and beta testing them and developing tools for them and processes for them. And that director who I worked with in New Orleans, the DP who worked with him before, had this complaint because Michael just like, he's not very, you know, it sometimes seems like Michael would be happier if the crew wasn't there.
Gotcha.
And out of frustration one day, Scott, as a joke, said, well, maybe we should just get Michael a pair of eyeglass cameras and he could just direct the actors.
Oh my God.
And suddenly in my head, I was like,
bingo.
Brilliant.
Right.
And I spent like years building them. And I actually made a film. You might be able to find it on my Vimeo still, called Sugar Park Tavern.
Okay.
My friend Katya, who wrote New Orleans Bottom Horse, she wrote it. And it was the only film we ever made on them in the end. But originally I was designing them because I had a dream of going into the tunnels and remaking Chud with dancers in the tunnels and getting that POV shot. I know it was a long story, but that's where it was going.
Yeah, of course.
And so it was a curiosity. So I was like, I had the security camera guy in Ohio who used to like, I'd buy boards from, and I would like tape them to Buddy Holly glasses, and we do all this stuff. It was like crazy. None of it was, I can't build nice things that are like product ready, but I can get the job done,
Right. Just
like Lego
prototypes
style.
that'll do it. Right.
I'm a Lego guy. And so we did it. And so this project the idea of the Chud thing kept coming to me. And so it was one of those, like 2 a.m., 4 a.m., like every couple of weeks, I'd start Googling like how to get into the tunnels, how this. And this is like, 2008, 2009 at this point. So the internet's like a little less forward.
Right. It's just
with
kind
this,
of,
it
it's
was
coming,
like
but it's not there yet. Right.
you were like, I would be on like someone's live journal from 5 years before trying to find, like it was like deep archive because, no one talks about their illegal activity. And there wasn't Instagram to put it on yet the same way, it was Instagram, but not.
There wasn't that urbex community that you see nowadays. People are just like, okay, like you're going in there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was there, but they were more secretive, it was harder to get in.
Mm-hmm.
They were more underground. They were more a subculture because if you're in the urbex community, you're not in it to like hang out.
Yeah, exactly.
You're in it to hang out in tunnels. And so eventually I found Steve Duncan, who is the subject of the documentary. I just I found like a website through a website, and I found him, and I wrote an email, and I got a response like just long enough after that I'd kind of forgotten about it. And he was just coming back from Russia. And he was about to move to California to go to grad school.
I don't mean to cut you off, but was he doing something else in Russia, like urban exploring related, or was he just there doing something else?
Let's just say he got maybe a little close to the Kremlin, and it was a good thing he knows a little bit of broken French.
Okay, cool. Take it as you will, but okay, sounds good.
Yeah. The simple version of the story as I remember it.
So he was back from Russia,
and he was about to move to California in a few months, and this magical new camera called the 5D Mark II had just come out, which was the first SLR that really shot video, and it finally had a manual mode, and it kind of just happened at once. And I met him over chicken wings at some arriving home party, and we talked, and at that point, I had a deal. I was shooting parkour videos on the weekend. So I was climbing a lot, and I was like hopping around. And I had that experience. So he was like, come with me, get me some stock footage. I can sell it to the news stations. But I wasn't going to do that. And I had been in TV development. I was developing TV shows. I'm like, oh my God, I have access to something. And I went to MTV. I went to all my bosses. I went to everyone in the world. And everyone told me this was a dumb idea, that no one would like, that there was no audience, that there was no host. It had to have more than this. And everyone was just like, it won't work. And so I just said, fuck you. And I did it. And so that was essentially it. And I told myself that if TV wasn't going to air what I made, that I would make something that no one would ever be able to air on TV. And we shot like 4 or 5 days a week for an entire summer. I think it was about like 35 adventures we went on. I have drives. I have stuff. I have places we went that I can't show anyone kind of vibe. Like I have some stuff like, and I have some really interesting archival stuff, and we release some of it every once in a while. But yeah, we spent the whole summer, and I just didn't know what it was. I shot a lot of things. The only thing I told him was pretend we're on a date, and like treat me like we're on a date and take me through it. And we just became, and it was like, we weren't drinking, but it was like becoming drinking buddies. Right. It was like having a video game buddy, and it was just enjoyable. I have this great scar. Let's see if you can see it on my shin.
Oh my gosh.
A little bit in light.
Scar.
My first night. So, my first night in the tunnels with Steve. He had finally agreed to let me go down there. We're about to do it. I had all my gear, like one of these like YouTube kids. I had like my DSLR, and I had my audio recorder, and it was like more budget than what exists today. But it was like, but I was ready to film. Yeah. And I'm in a tunnel, and we're just like, and we're in the, and I remember it was the first night, first tunnel. Who knows how far we're in at this point, but we're in the tunnels, and my leg falls through the track and I drop, and a train's coming and I have to jump and get my leg out, and I lost my shoe and I had to go back and get it. And but I kept going, I finally had my subject. I finally had
Right. You got
everything
your
going.
adrenaline pumping. You're just, yeah.
I keep going, and suddenly, we go, and I have my subject of everything. I don't want to stop. So we climb through these other stations. We're going all over the place. And, we've been at it probably 4 or 5 hours at this point, at least. And Steve's like, should we go up the bridge? And I was like, yeah, I got to go up the bridge. And so we're going to the bridge, and I look down, I'm like, man, my leg is feeling really warm. And I look down, and basically my knee, from here down, completely soaked in blood. But I couldn't tell because of all the dirt from the tunnel. Soaked. I had gashed open this huge wound. And Steve looks at me, was like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I'm going to climb the bridge. And we climbed the bridge. I wasn't going to lose my subject then. I came back home that night. My left ankle was black and disgusting. I went to a doctor. I was so afraid.
Right.
And I was like, do you tell the doctor you're in a subway tunnel? I did.
It's like, guess there might be here. There. Yeah.
But I had gotten my subject he wanted going. So I basically shot for at least 4 or 5 more weeks, just with a bummed ankle and a fucked up shin. And, just in it's crazy. I think of it now, the water and some of the stuff we were in, but I wasn't going to lose and there's a lesson I learned. Mike Carmine, my college cinematography professor, I think said this as a joke, but I do it. It's kind of something snipers do. But if you want to get better at hand holding a camera, it's not about strength. I'm not a big guy.
Yeah.
I'm not. But I can hold the camera longer than almost anyone. I operate 12, 16 hours a day. When I was at MTV, I'd be there for 16 hours and I would have 14 hours of footage when I came out. You know what I mean? It was just how I was raised. And it's more about how you use your body, how you use your mind. So there's this trick that snipers use, and it's all about your breathing, which snipers will take a big pot of boiling water and hold it between their arms and keep walking around until it stops spilling, because then your breathing is smooth. So what I'll do is I do that with a boiling hot mug of water. So if I'm getting ready for a shoot, or if I have something, I have a rate regimen, but if I take a boiling hot mug of water because it rebalances your body and your breathing. So the first 2 days of shooting on my bummed ankle, the footage was a nightmare. I couldn't use any of it. I couldn't get it. And so I started doing, and it was interesting. I did that boiling mug thing every day for a week, and it taught me to rebalance my weight, to not use my left side. And then I had to do it. And then when I healed, it sucked. I had to do it again to get my balance back.
Yeah.
Crazy things. Most of Undercity, I don't, most of the time when I'm shooting, you can't look at the LCD screen to shoot or to focus. Because it's if you're looking at the screen, you're already too late.
Right.
So Undercity, I fell into the track because I was trying to frame the shot while following him. So 90% of Undercity is I'm not even looking at the camera. I'm a Leica shooter, so I'm used to not looking at the camera like a rangefinder guy. But just you teach your hand 3 focus positions: 5 feet, 2 feet, and 10 feet. And then throw it to infinity. And then all you're doing is you're just following a person, and you're using your ears and your heart to frame and pull focus.
Exactly.
Instead of your
eyes. What looks good. So you're just, So you said you bummed out your ankle, but you still decided to go on the bridge. Are you talking about your climb up the Williamsburg Bridge?
One of them. I forget. I believe the first climb we did, I don't think is in the film. I climbed that bridge 3 times. 2 of them while we were filming it and 1 after. I forget what other bridge I climbed, but we did it again it's just there's nothing like being on top of the bridge.
That's one of the things I definitely we don't really have time to go through each one of these 4 stops, because you went, of course, to the sewer, you went to the subway station, you went to that underneath the tunnels, of course, but that ascent of the Williamsburg Bridge is probably one of the most powerful shots in that, and just it's absolutely insane. So where did the idea come from to try to climb this bridge?
Oh, if only there was that much logic. It was just kind of on the list as an option, and we were there that night.
Climb this bridge.
We were, it was fun. It was so present. It's just, and if I can spread that on at all, the more present you are, the more opportunities work out. It's
Hmm.
the planning the bridge. It's like, think about all the variables. I don't want to describe them here, but think about all the
Right.
variables that could go into at night climbing a
Oh
bridge.
yeah, you even saw
It's
that in the documentary itself. There was
yeah,
police officers like right below you guys and like a news chopper going around, and Steve's just sitting there like, yeah, I think we could maybe do it. Like,
yeah.
just that's
you
it's
ca-
crazy.
and you can't plan. I mean, once we were the found the don't say that word. We climbed a tower in Vegas that is still incomplete, and it the bottom wasn't complete, and so it took us like 6 hours of just climbing around rebarb up and down just to find a window to climb into. All these
Yeah,
things. I've been lucky that all these experiences have helped me strip attachment to planning. You need to plan. You can't play jazz unless you know the
right.
notes, but you want to play jazz,
Yeah, of
like,
course. Yeah,
who wants to play Mozart shit when you could be playing jazz on the street and having it come out of your heart? And jazz is a funny thing. When I was in film school is when John Cassavetes became a big deal and everyone liked his films. And I was a camera assistant during that time. And every film became like actors improvising and two handheld cameras,
yeah,
and they missed the entire point of Cassavetes. Cassavetes didn't just show up with his friends and just be like, talk. They rehearsed, they
yeah.
developed,
Right.
they would read it out loud, they would record it, then
This was not
retype it.
impromptu. It was yeah,
But then when you've done so much, just, film production, unfortunately, is set up more like waiting for a tornado to come. We all get prepped, we all get ready, and then the shoot day starts, and everyone sit there being like,
right.
who's gonna hurt me today? You know what I mean? Or who's gonna stop me? And it's what we're working with my company. We're working to try to change. And I feel like if we can start treating shoots more like mission launches,
Right. Like every single
you
person
know,
has their spot and each person has responsibility and like we know how to do it. Like, yeah, you have to have the whole team doing it's a culmination of the team skills, which makes a production
but
happen.
that comes from prep. But you can't do it unless everyone, right now on film sets, what happens is they hire more people so that you have to have less communication and everyone does one thing.
Yeah,
But if you had less people and just spent a week communicating, before the shoot. And
exactly.
so they're little things. And that's what's I think, again, the beautiful opportunity of right now, which is just that we're being forced to relook at everything we're doing. And we're getting to redefine it, because how many things in our life right now are only there because of the habits of our parents and our
Yeah.
grandparents? How many things, it's like when you read about World War I and chivalry, you know chivalry existed in 1900 as a concept. Can you imagine you're an officer in the French army dressed like Napoleon, like a Napoleon's arm, and you're marching into battle with your sword in like 1910?
Right.
That's 100 years ago. Chivalry existed, and at the same time there was technology and world-killing technology. We're about to have
Right.
airplanes that's coming
Cars are
out,
coming out, right? All that stuff.
and that conflict forced the world to reevaluate how it looks at its everyday life.
And that
And and the optimist in me, I've been waiting and see if this moment would come for our generation. And the optimist in me is hoping that of all the ugliness coming out of right now, that's the beauty at the end of the path.
right. Setting
It's
that
like, does the florist shop still make sense? I don't know. You know, paper time cards certainly don't make sense right now.
yeah.
You know, like when you build a house in 5 years, are you going to build it with an in-law suite, so that you have a place to quarantine, or a
Take pages,
foyer
yeah.
so you have a mud room? And they're going to be little 3% changes. It's not like we're going to suddenly be in hover cars, but in those 3% changes are opportunities for people like us to go, what is our passion? What is our vision for what we do? What is the
Right.
process in which we want to work, and and make it? Because right now it's people listening. I've had over 10 years of no one wanting to listen to new workflows because they were making enough money with the old ones.
Yeah. Of
I
course.
I saw film fall and come back. I saw digital fall and come back. I saw features do it. I've seen it happen in TV. I've seen it happen in commercials. It's all going to happen over and over. And
Yeah,
every time
until
there's a
that
small
system
group of people who
broke,
get to decide.
until the system actually gets broken. I mean, you even, of course, everyone has that hindsight of like, oh, this isn't working, this isn't working. Once it actually happens, it comes to that point where it breaks. That's when people are like, this is really isn't working. Like you said, you see it during this whole pandemic. People are seeing so many shortcomings and so much stuff that's happening around the world. It's crazy.
And we've been too busy to do anything about it till now.
Right. I mean, yeah,
So
definitely.
So I'm hoping, that's my hope, and maybe it's wishful thinking because that hope aligns very much with the goals I've had for a long time and my dreams for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it's hard not to be seduced by the narrative of the future that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But I do believe, as much as we're in a moment of fear, we're in a moment of huge opportunity.
Right. All right. So we kind of trailed off. I apologize. That was
Yeah,
a very good conversation.
I'm that way too.
I
So
love it
don't
though.
worry.
I mean, this has been some really good conversations today, man. I'm really enjoying it. So I guess before we kind of wind things down, I wanted to, since we were talking about Undercity, I wanted to talk about the reception. We were saying that people were kind of doubting this. They were saying this isn't going to succeed, but of course it did. It's sitting at over 3.8 million views, like I said. What was it like to see this tremendous success happen?
And if I will say it as it was a great lesson in why not to make your life valued around success, because it happens so quickly, and then it's overwhelming, and then you can't even keep up with it, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And Undercity was fascinating. It took us about a year and a half to edit it. It was a tough edit to figure out for something that's so simple when you see it. We tried so many things, and I didn't want to release it right away. And it was about a year and a half later, December of 2010, an explorer, Erling K. was coming from Norway and wanted an underground tour of the city for 5 days. And we went, and he invited the New York Times and he invited NPR. They came with us. I saw an NPR reporter I will never go into a subway tunnel with more than 2 people ever again because of it. They're not safe places to go with large groups. I can't.
They're tight.
I am grateful I went, but I went with someone who knew what they were doing, who had done it for a decade, and I would not go alone. And I cannot, you go down there, there's 5 third rails sometimes. You don't know what's safe.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you literally can't get out without talking with the third rail. And you need someone with a lot of, but anyway, that's all. So it took a year and a half, and the New York Times was coming out, and it was January 2nd of 2011. I released it. And I had no idea, that film cost me we probably spent like $1,500 on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, it wasn't made to be a film like Feral. It wasn't made to be anything. It was a compulsion. It was something that I kept shooting every day and seeing stuff that I felt like I had never seen before. And I had this tool, this camera that worked the way my brain did, that could see in the light like I did. I knew I had it, and we just kept going. But I didn't know, I put it online. I remember that morning I called Steve, Steve, I can't believe it. Maybe 10,000 people will see this. And and then you wake up the next morning and it's 500,000, and it keeps going. And suddenly, we were on the Today Show, we were on the news, we were being interviewed all over. It was great. It was a flash. And I was young. I didn't have a movie ready to go. It wasn't like I was trying to get an agent, or I was using it to try to get, actually agents came, I'd sent them away. It was like my goal was the achievement. My goal was to show you a world you'd never seen.
Right.
And to have, I never expected it, but I'm proud of it. I know well enough to know that the variables that created it were just as much circumstance as me. And I'm grateful that for that one moment, I was able to get into the stream and capture that fish.
Yeah.
I still can't believe it. The interviews, it really, I'm grateful my friend Pete Skidisi, who worked in advertising, who I'd been helping at the time. I wouldn't be a commercial director if not for Undercity, because when Undercity, because Pete, when that was succeeding, Pete took me around to all the production. Actually, it's so funny. Tomorrow, my company, our sales rep, Diane Patrone, was like the sales rep I always wanted to meet all those years ago when it came out. The world, as you get older, it gets smaller.
Right.
And it's wild. And so that was a nice bonus. But it was funny. It came at a weird time, about 5 days after we released Undercity, I moved to North Carolina and I taught high school. I had created Maid came back in my life a few years later. I won an Emmy for a show directing the 200th episode of the series in a school in North Carolina. And I stayed there and I came back to finish Undercity, but I went to go teach. So it's funny, all the jobs came, all these things came, all these opportunities, but I turned them all down because I had a classroom with kids. I miss them so much. If Warhorses, if any of you ever end up listening to this, I think of you every day.
Oh.
I do. The happiest moments I've had teaching was beautiful. And so I was in North Carolina, I was pro bono. I thought I could teach a class based off a curriculum I wrote in my head and make a feature film at the same time with kids. So that was ambition pulling out on me. So, it was a dream come true. And I'm grateful as I look back that I didn't take those out because I don't want to make Undercity things the rest of my lives. Instead, I just jumped to my passion, which was then help working with kids.
And that's almost great because, you had that Undercity success and you had that in your background where you also now able to go off and do this other stuff. So that seemed to work out pretty well.
Yeah. It was, I couldn't be more grateful. I don't think there's a lot of secret to what I've done. I'm pretty consistent. I'm a hard worker, but I don't work 24 hours a day anymore. And you just, you just have to get your compass aligned with opportunity because you can feel it. You feel it in your jimmies, you feel it in your chest, when it's there and you just have to. And it's the phrase I've been using lately is it's just when you have the opportunity, you have to punch the gods. Just think about all of Greek literature is about gods who started to accept their power.
Right.
And it was the mortals who challenged them that changed the world.
Exactly. Okay. So winding things down and just kind of getting this to a standstill, I want to talk about Farrell. Farrell, of course, after I saw Undercity and after I kind of got in touch with you personally, Andrew, I was able to attend the Yes Film Festival in Columbus and see Farrell, which is, I know you had your documentaries in the past and you had your full-length features, but was this your first feature film that you directed, wrote, and kind of did everything for?
I would say this is my first narrative feature as a director. On this project, I was, because you're breaking into tunnels. You can't, you can't bring, Lubezki's crew. And I was the director. I also served as the cinematographer. I don't really say cinematographer. I operate the camera more. Cinematographer is a leader. I pulled my own focus. We made the film with a crew of 4 people. It was Colleen, the love of my life and my partner in all things and production designer. Adam Solstice, an amazing sound person who also stepped up and became camera assistant, a great budding filmmaker. We had a great trade. He saved my butt and I taught him a lot. Then I had a producer and the 4 of us basically made the film together. But yeah, it was my first film. And just like Undercity, if I was going to make a first film, I've had a lot of films that almost got made that fell apart, that people were going to give me money for. And I decided that if I was going to make a statement as a feature film, I was going to make a film that I thought that no one else in the world would be capable of making. So good or bad, there's lots of, not things I would change, but there were a lot of lessons on this film. But I'm proud of it because even when I look at the parts that wound me on it, I see something that I believe that I'm the only person who could have achieved.
And I completely agree with that statement because it almost seems like a follow-up on Undercity in the sense of just subject matter. I mean, it's based off true stories of people living underground in New York City. It's the same kind of thing of tunnel dwellers. It follows Yasmine and her journey through this whole thing. So did you kind of want to follow up on Undercity and the subject matter through Feral, or was it kind of separate but still equal, I guess, to the subject matter?
There was a homeless man when I was at NYU on University and 10th and 11th that I would see all the time. And he looked just like a choir teacher I had in like in middle school, Mr. Doyle, I'm pretty sure his name was. And he kind of looked like Jerry Springer, Mr. Doyle, and this guy kind of did too.
Gotcha.
And I saw this guy all throughout college. And you know, like he was like a tall kind of white guy, like looked like he could be a teacher in a school, but had like the overcoat and was like a little shaky, and maybe we'd yell every once in a while. You know, the spectrum thing. And I saw him for years, you know, just looked like a guy who was living on the street, didn't look like someone who was living still. And I didn't go down there. I graduated school, and it was probably a couple of years before we wrote Feral. I was back down in that area and I saw him again. And his hair was long and he was emaciated and his teeth were chattering and his nails were
his
long.
state had kind of declined a little bit, would you say?
I mean, a little bit is a kind way of saying it. It would be like, it looked like, he had been left in like a muddy cave for like a month and came out. And it really affected me. And I wrote something down that day that kind of became the soul of the film, which was that, when we allow a person to become invisible, they become animals. And when you let someone become an animal, we're just asking for nature to take care of them. And
a really good way of putting it.
And the image that came to my head was an older woman dreading through a blizzard. And I thought, I get emotional thinking about it. And I thought that to me was the most helpless fate I could think of.
So you wanted to kind of tell that, it's very, that's very crazy. It's a very emotional subject matter that can be touched, not just in New York City, it's kind of something that's everywhere in the United States. You see it. It's something really sad that we deal with almost every day. So
I've been in those tunnels. I've been in those tunnels, I've been in tunnels in New York and Vegas. There used to be a lot more. I mean, there were a lot more people in the tunnels in New York before I got there, the dark days. And I, we would meet someone. We did Undercity, and there's probably only one person we knew still there. There's a lot of sad things, in Vegas. I've seen homeless people all over in very different ways, and I don't know. And I just feel like movies, the concept of the homeless in our society is a really hard one.
Yeah. Because
it's an automatic signal of how we failed each other. And at the same time, it's so hard to look into the mirror at a homeless person. It's like, that's a father, that's a daughter, that's a son. That person was in school with you. You know what I mean? They were in your first grade classroom at some point. But something happened. And that idea that something can happen, I think is so, Undercity works because we're all afraid of the dark.
Yep.
I know you're afraid of the dark. I know it because you're a human. And the dark is scary. So that's my tool. I can use that. I can throttle that up. I can throttle that down. Yeah, and the unknown is all I need. And I don't know, the more I thought about that person and the more I thought about the people living underground, and I would watch movies. There's this Richard Gere movie about being homeless that's very realistic, but it kind of misses it. And because I feel like we have two narratives of homeless people. We have either they're crazy or they're down on their luck, like an alcoholic.
Right.
And we use morality to tell the story of the homeless in our films, as opposed to actually telling the story of the homeless.
Because you have to amp it up a little bit. I mean, it's a very touchy subject matter. It's very sad, but you still have to, when you're doing the kind of Hollywood style production, you have to amp it up to that level that pulls out the heartstrings even more. I mean, whenever you're doing Feral, you're doing this more of like a narrative that's telling a real story that you can follow along. It's not like that's a sad moment that you would feel in a Hollywood production. You're really getting in touch with the grittiness of it.
I would take old gym clothes. I'd leave my wallet and my cell phone at home. I would just bring like a Metro card with like two swipes, and I would get on the train and I would just ride it, smelling my own filth and just sitting there. I would walk through like the tunnels, and I would just spend that time alone.
Yeah.
And and it's not what you think it is. It's not the mental illness. Yeah, there's mental illness, but just spend, I mean, we're all going through it right now in the world. How
Right.
many people, how many relationships are changing, just spending that time in your head, and you lose it and you stop feeling like a person and you start feeling invisible. It happens so
Yeah.
quickly. And I know there are people who feel it every day, and for whatever grace, I'm grateful I'm not one of them.
Yep.
I'm grateful I don't have to live that life, and I have great compassion for anyone who does.
Yeah.
And but that life is you know there's joy in every life. There's you look for it, and I don't know, I hoped that by telling the story of a person in that situation and focusing the story on how they find their joy and how they find their peace.
Yeah.
I thought by focusing on those things and how impossible still, even when you focus on those things, to get the opportunity for the world to let you have that little bit of warmth. And I thought if that was just enough, I thought that would be enough for
Yeah.
a film.
So what made you kind of want to tell that story through the eyes of Yasmine?
She, man, the script went through a couple, originally she was a much different woman. She was an older woman, and she appeared in my head. And my good friend Jason Brown, super producer, he produced like The Witcher and Ben-Hur. He does great stuff. We went to college together. He's one of my first college friends. And we were right when I was writing the first draft. I remember talking to him, and he gave me the note that changed my life on the project. Originally it was an older woman. I was telling him, and he looked at me and he said, uh, she can't be old, because if she's old, then there's no hope to begin with.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's why he's the super producer.
Yeah, that's
Great.
insane.
Yeah,
That's mind blowing right there.
yeah, Jason Brown, genius. My heart to you. The film wouldn't have worked without that note. I really believe it, and she just kept appearing. And then the first version of the script I wrote with Priscilla Kavanaugh.
Mhm.
It's her birthday today, so happy
Happy
birthday,
birthday,
Priscilla.
Priscilla, if you're out there.
And then I have a friend, Jason Mendez, who's the other writer of the project, and him and I have been developing a methodology and process together for a few years. Uh, we started rewriting a script of Paul Schrader's that was supposed to go into production, that a bunch of people were going to pay for, and kept disappearing. And we started there, and then Feral was part two of that. And I have to say, a lot of the music, a lot of the DNA, like Yasmine's personality, a lot of that was Jason, and he really did a beautiful job.
Yeah.
Jason is such a, it's such a gift as a collaborator to have someone who just so many details of life and intricacies. He's like YouTube in his head, and so together we just create these little worlds, and he created a great character to live inside of it.
And this world is following her through this journey through this like super intense blizzard in the city. Were you recording this during like an actual blizzard happening?
So this film was shot over about 2.5 weeks in February, uh, of a praying for snowfall every day. And actually, it ended up on a lot of days being unseasonably warm. And I think it was February, in March we shot, and it was like a little unseasonably warm. And that whole shooting period, if it would snow, it would only snow for like 45 minutes or an hour at a time. So no matter what we were doing, if there was snow, we dropped it. And she has those braids.
Yeah.
She has these braids in the beginning of the film, and she loses them. So every time you redo those braids, it's like $60 in 3 hours. So you would be like, well, she's braided. Do we go for the ending or do we not? And actually, the ending you see in the film of her walking through the blizzard, each one of those shots was shot on a different night.
Wow. Interesting. I never would have known that. So Did that kind of inclement weather of it not being what you wanted it to affect the shooting at all, or were you able to get around it?
Oh, you don't get around it. You embrace it. It's
Okay,
a gift. When, the great unity above us gives us a gift on a shoot day, it's part of the shoot, right?
gotcha.
I can't run from the rain. I would say actually what I think is the best, my 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 top images, one of the best images in the entire thing was an image that the opportunity of weather gave us. It was in the middle of the day. We were shooting on the west side and it started snowing.
Mm.
And I grabbed Annapurna and I said, let's go. And that whole opening of her walking through the tunnel
Yeah.
in the snow, that's not in the script. We did that. It just snowed and we shot it. So much of the film, I don't even, maybe Jason Sager and Jason Mendez could figure it out. How much of this film is the film we began with versus the film that edited together is tough to tell. I mean, there's whole storylines and characters and plots that I just deleted while we were filming. I filmed days with characters, and after like a few days, I got so lucky. I met Annapurna, and she had such power to her when I met her.
Yeah.
I wrote the first draft of the film with Priscilla in 2 weeks. And then Jason and I, in December, in an apartment with just 2 arrow beds and a blanket and a table, wrote the real draft in another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was January. And I knew I had a short window to film. So I told I made a plan. I was like, if this happens by this day, we'll go. If this happens by this day, we'll go.
Yeah.
And I met Annapurna, and she wasn't what I expected. She wasn't necessarily, she was an opportunity. It wasn't the image in our head when we wrote it. But I met her. I walked in the coffee shop. I met her, and in 10 seconds, I was just like,
Yeah.
this is someone I can put in a movie.
And for people who have seen it, you completely can tell that. I mean, she radiates that aura throughout the entire movie. Like, I cannot imagine it without with a different character. She is so perfect for that role, and she does it so well.
And so, you find a great crayon like Annapurna who can draw such beautiful rainbows, and you just restructure the world around it. So like, rehearsals don't help her, and she gets nervous interacting with people in real life on the streets, which is a big part of the character.
Right. Yeah.
So
a lot of real life expert usage, right?
Yeah. And so how do so when you have a necessary tool like working in public but at the same time that makes the person you need to protect, your lead actor, need to keep safe and comfortable, you have to build a plan that's a balancing act. How does that uncomfort help the scene without hurting the actor?
Right.
And so, with weather, with all those things, we would just embrace it. Originally, she had a little brother that kept appearing like throughout it, like in her head almost. And Annapurna, she was just so real that after a day or two, it felt so honest that all the artificial things that I had done to make it a movie weren't necessary. And I just started tripping them. I was also the only one holding the camera, and there was 4 people. I remember the first thing we shot was that apartment scene where Kevin Hoffman, that guy at the beginning who serenades her.
Yes.
The world. I hope someone listening, please hire Kevin Hoffman. He is just an amazing talent. He's got the ability to do that Ratso Rizzo Dustin Hoffman thing. And I don't know why the world hasn't let him. I would put him in everything I make if there's a role for him. And I wrote the role for him. When the character came out of Jason, I was like, this is for Kevin. And Kevin, he did it so brilliantly. That song, he had a whole math system. He came up with punctuation, timing. He figured out the pattern of the script. He practiced the song, and he spent a month on that song. And that take you see was the first time he ever played it out loud for another person.
That's crazy.
He kept it to himself the entire, that's how we all worked together.
Right.
That's what made it fun. And that first day of filming was that scene. We were in an empty apartment. Colleen did a great job turning it into not an empty apartment. And I had all these plans. I had my shot list. I thought I was a director. I do these commercials. I was ready to go. My rehearsal time got all cut short because Annapurna had another film. And And it was like, oh God. And those first 6 hours of shooting were just miserable. I just couldn't get anything that felt alive. They were acting good. It wasn't like there was a problem, but it all just felt like movie bullshit. You know,
Yeah.
like nothing of it felt like something. And I remember sitting there against the wall, eating my takeout Chinese food at lunch, like cowering in the corner. And I had a realization, and I said to myself, the only way I will get out of this alive is by only embracing what is good and ignoring what is bad. It worked for Napoleon. It worked for, you know, Putin.
Yeah.
It worked for the founding fathers.
Yep.
You know, why wouldn't it work for me? And that's what I did. And it became such a freeing process, because every day on the shoot after that, every scene, every line, every performance, every moment became, is this as real? Is this as honest? Is this a discovery to the level at which we've already achieved, or does it not pass our test? And if it didn't pass our test, we didn't film it. And there are holes in the movie because of it that usually people don't catch. You know, there's things missing. And that's why I'm proud of it, because you know, we didn't have lights. I used like one light on the entire film. And you know, it was jazz. And what I'm proud of in the process this team discovered throughout making it, and what I'm proud of with the final film, is that, you know, if your listeners, if I'm lucky enough to have some of your listeners watch the film, when they see the film, what I'm really proud of is that you are seeing the absolute best moments that a group of people could pull out of each other every day. And even as we edited it together, you know, story, it has to make sense, but those scenes are based off, what did we discover? What did we find? What made me feel something? What made you go up and what made you go down? And it's a different way of approaching a story. It's a different way of approaching editing a film. I know there are films that look like it, but you know, it's a different methodology. And I hope, you know, we made the film we spend so much of our lives alone. And whether we're surrounded by people or we are actually isolated, that voice inside us who attacks us never goes away.
No,
never goes away. And you know, I hope I can make films that are little gifts, and I hope that they are gifts that will give someone a chance to release that loneliness and to step into the light. To heal, to look at their trauma a different way. And I'm not there yet. I haven't achieved it yet. I don't know if I ever will, but that's my goal and that's my dream. And you know, I hope we worked with a lot of great former homeless people. We've shown it to a lot of people. I just, you know, you can't give your money to everyone, but I just, you know, I hope even if you don't have money, at the next homeless person you see down the street, you'll smile at them or just make eye contact.
Yeah, exactly. Because everybody just ignore it, you know? Yeah, exactly.
And just be kind. And you know what? Sometimes it won't go well and sometimes it will. I always, you know, I try to always keep cash in my pocket and just try to give it to someone every day, especially right now. We're donating. Oh my God, is this my delivery? Oh, hold on. Oh, for 923? Oh, yes.
You got a delivery.
Sorry, I missed it yesterday.
That's awesome.
Hey. Do you need me to sign?
Good.
For Andrew Wonder, you can just drop it here, and I'm right here. Oh, awesome. I'm building this new camera. I finally got the pieces. But yeah, you know, I want them to be gifts, because we watch so much shit every day. We watch so much on Instagram. We watch so much, but we're not going to films for narrative anymore. You know, a high schooler has experienced more narrative, like hours of narrative, than anyone who made films in the 70s. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so they don't have to serve that purpose anymore. But we're now even more confused about our feelings. We're all even more confused about our place in the world. And so I hope, again, that we can use cinema now just to find our peace. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, man. Have a good
one. Okay, so in the last kind of thing I want to talk about Farrell. So in this film, you also feature the music of New York City legend Moondog.
Yes, I do. I can hear you. I just got to put the
Okay,
box in.
sure, fine. Just as long as you can hear me, we're all good. He was often referred to as the Viking of New York by thousands of New York City residents. How did you first discover his sound?
Oh, this is a great, I'm so glad you asked about this. This is such a great story. Well, like all great things in my life, I have to thank either Jason Mendez or Colleen for them. And Moondog was a seed that Jason planted. But it was never the intention to be in the film the way it was. That's the magic what happened with Moondog. So Moondog began as just the record in the apartment
Yeah.
that is stolen. But in the script, like when we went into filming, that was all the intention. There was no idea more about Moondog. I had known the music, Philip Glass, big influence. Like I'd known the legends, but I liked the music, but it was never more than that.
Yeah.
But all these beautiful serendipitous things kept happening as we filmed. So the first one was, I think one of the best performances in the film is Aurora, who plays the grandmother who Yasmine runs into. And she is, Aurora Flores and Tito Puente. If you want to look up the two of them together, the most interesting article you ever read. She was like the first female reporter for Billboard magazine, salsa performer, legend, brilliant. Sammy Mendenhall, who does so much great casting for me for commercials, found Aurora, found that grit, just found so many great faces and personalities for us. And Aurora, at first didn't want to do that Dina Washington song that was in the scene when we were prepping. She wanted to do a salsa song. And, as a director, you're like, you listen, because sometimes, if you get stuck in your ideas, you never hear better ones.
Yes.
And so, but I knew I wanted that song, but I was going to but you got to listen and you go on the journey to figure out why the person has this idea. And we were talking about the song, and then she stops me and she's like, Moondog, I saw you put Moondog in the script. I know Moondog. And I'm like, what? And it turned out into this crazy story that Aurora actually grew up and was very good friends with Moondog's daughter.
No way.
And actually spent a blackout. The only night she spent away from her father's gaze as a child was at Moondog's house during a blackout.
Oh my God.
And it was a friend she lost contact because Moondog eventually went to Europe. Yep. And so that was the first one. And so then it became all this, wow. And then that the record store owner, Benny, who owns a real record store, he's such a personality. And Annapurna, friends with Annapurna, his uncle, when he tells the story, my uncle knew Moondog. That was improvised. He just said that during the scene. He didn't even tell me. I didn't even know that when I was filming that his uncle had seen Moondog. And just all these things kept happening. And so Moondog just kept growing and growing. And when we were cutting the film, and Moondog's music's kind of hard to find.
Yeah,
actually,
it's very rare.
It was hard to find a lot of it. Most of it, even in the final film, I mean, we got licensing and stuff, but the tracks we ripped from YouTube because no one has masters.
Right. Yeah.
Some of it doesn't exist. And it's someone's digitized YouTube. So you're seeing MP3s up there. And, but when we were editing the film, it was very difficult to figure out what it was, because you're trying to make a gift and you start with one thing and you don't know what it's become. Yeah. And, Jason Sager did a great job. He did the first cut and it was very good in just a few weeks, in 3 weeks, as quick as we shot it. And as we started playing, it was just the first thing I always look for in edit. It's not the story, it's not the character, it's not the style, it's the heartbeat. If you can find a heartbeat in an edit, if you feel something at some point in an edit, you can structure the rest and everything works. You just need to feel something. And so we were playing around with scenes and I started doing this every day. I would wake up and on my way to the edit, I lived in Brooklyn and Jason cuts in the city in Chelsea. So it was one train ride. It was a great 30, 40-minute commute every day. And I started just waking up and just listening to Moondog because I had all the tracks, because I had downloaded them and I was just listening to them. And every day I just started listening to them. And so I started just seeing the movie every day, listening to Moondog. And the first scene we figured out was that scene, it's called On Broadway is the song where she's out in the yellow asking for a cigarette.
Yes.
That was the first scene we cracked. And when we put that track on that scene, suddenly the scene came alive. And suddenly we had, actually, that was originally at the beginning of the film. Then
Oh,
Paul Schrader was actually the one who put the tunnels at the beginning, which
yes.
I'll always be grateful. Because I remember even screaming from being like, God, this is a great movie if people can make it past the first 5 minutes. And he was smart enough to tell me to put a good scene at
Yeah.
the beginning. But Moondog just became more and more so, and we started just putting him throughout the film. And the film was so serious and so like dense that the lightness of the film of the music combined with it, it just brought it alive.
Because it's
And
it's
luckily,
kind of like loose and atmospheric music. You know, it's not like a heavy song that's gonna like grip you by the heartstring, but it's stuff that sets the scene with very nice little ditties almost. You know, they're like little chimes. Like they're just, it's very cool music.
and luckily his estate and the German lawyer law group who runs it were very kind to us. They were very open. To have such a great artist, such a great poet, such
Yeah.
a mythical person, to have the honor of being able to say music by Moondog on your film,
Right.
that I was able to have enough of his music that the soundtrack's Moondog. And as far as I know, I don't believe there's another film to be able to say the same.
Awesome.
And it's like, the New York I grew up with has been changing since I was born and becoming something else. And for years now, we've been saying goodbye to the old New York. And part of this film for me was a chance to capture the way I see New York changing, and the elements I see changing, and the blocks I see changing, and the stores and the people. And so, Moondog to me is my way of honoring and my way of grabbing something from the New York that was before me, and hopefully passing it to the next group of people who make a myth out of my favorite city.
Yeah. And I think Moondog was the perfect person to do that. So that's great. Andrew, I really appreciate everything today. I kind of want to end with talking about this film, The Great Fair. You've been working on this project with your partner, Colleen, correct, called The Great Fair?
Yeah, Colleen Dodge, yes.
And in this film, you're like visiting a lot of different fairs all across the United States. Is this kind of the first project you two made together, as like just you two?
Just us two, yeah. It was either we either made the smart or the silly decision thinking we could do it on our own. It was I wanted you to see it. I hope we'll have a little release for it. I hope we'll have a little release for
I watched that video you sent me of it, the like 9-minute,
the 8-minute version. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the film. And so it actually was right after I finished Feral. I had the runner's high. You have like the runner's high from like running a mile. And I was like, let's just make another feature this year. And Colleen and I, God, how lucky is it to have a partner like this? We usually spend August traveling. So the first year we kind of drove up the coast of California. Second year we went to Alaska for the fairs.
Yeah.
Last year we went to Utah. And so we were like, let's just travel to fairs. And I had this, there was this stock from the 70s, The Great American Cowboy, that was very influential on me, and the way that they cover scenes and they make stuff. And I don't know, I thought there was a way, I wanted to look at what traditions, I hope one day someone will say that I got to create a new American myth. I hope, that would be, I think, the ultimate achievement as an artist, is to create a myth. The last one we got was Star Wars that we truly got. Maybe Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But truly Star Wars was the last myth our world was like given.
Yeah.
And we need new ones. And I think America, more than any, I mean, I don't know any other country, so forget that statement. But I believe that America needs them right now, because for a long time we were individualist, and now after a couple hundred years we're having to become one country, and we don't know what the values are of our country, because Texas values are different than New York values. And it's only, I believe, Colleen, we only have a few states left. We're almost at 50. And I believe we have to look at the traditions at the quiet part of life.
Yeah.
So we went to the fairs to just see how much of that America was left. And I met people I never expected.
Right.
I shot in a way I never had before. I built a lot of lenses that didn't exist. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's I hope it shows that there's a lot of beauty in the cycle of the fairs and a lot of humanity there, which isn't always what we think
Right.
of when we think of a state fair.
Yeah. And how are you able to access these fairs for such raw footage? I mean, you're shooting a lot of like, just animals. You're shooting these people that are like career fair participators. How are you able to like? Were you contacting these fairs beforehand and like, hey, this is what we're doing, or how are you able to access them like this?
It's a little bit of each. So the fairs themselves, to actually get into them, we were very grateful with these fairs that we had fairs that were open to us. Some were, some weren't. Uh, the Oakland County in Michigan, very grateful to the Delaware State Fair and the Alaska State Fair, especially the way they opened their arms to us as filmmakers and the open access. I've been on a lot of weird adventures. I've been in the Middle East. I've been in Africa. I've lived with oil workers on rigs. I've done the gamut. And being a New Yorker, you usually have the world, like, unless you're dealing with a European, as a New Yorker in America, anywhere you go, usually the cards are stacked against you.
Yeah.
Cops don't want to see your license plate. You know what I mean? Like, people like think of you way, and yeah, and there are, and there's a reason for that. So I think being forced to shed that has given me a lot of skills. And the way I usually approach it is, whether it, store, in the West Bank of the Middle East or a state fair, I look at people and I say, I am a blank canvas and I want you to show me your world. And I don't know anything. I have never raised an animal.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the history of a sewer tunnel. I only know about homelessness from what I've witnessed. But my camera gives me the ability to find a truth. And so we go.
Yeah. And I mean, like you mentioned, you're kind of used to it you've interacted with these people from this kind of homeless community and people in the underground New York. What was it like to interact with people from such a unique niche like this, like the fair crowd and these animal raising people? Was it just like completely new to you?
Oh, it was great. I loved it. I mean, thank you, Teresa, and your family in Michigan, because you guys, the girls, Andy, because we met this family at that fair, and they just took us everywhere. They showed us how they fed their chickens. It's cool. Like 4-H programs, they're like schools. It's like the people who run it, they're like teachers, and so it's great. So you get swept up, and I was so, my heart was warmed by the kindness and the openness of people,
Mm-hmm.
and the amount that people, and because I think of a state fair as like a local Olympics.
Oh yeah.
It's whether you grow the biggest pumpkin or make the best pie, this is a moment in your community where you get to shine.
Right.
But you don't usually get a lot of attention for it. It's usually inside the little niche. Like,
Right.
there's 3 people who grow giant pumpkins. It's not like you're
Exactly.
duking it out. And so I believe that since our intention was honoring that pride and that creativity, it allowed people to be very open to us.
Right.
And it's just like, I'm here in Texas during the coronavirus, and think about Texas. It's a state of ranchers. They know how to get disease out of a herd. And as you walk around even a Target here, you see that the way that a Texan handles it is different than a New Yorker.
Exactly.
And so to get to spend so much time with such extreme individual personalities, but also see that deep down that it was still love and kindness and warmth that connected them.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, for anyone to take the time out of their day to show me and my camera what they enjoy about their lives is the greatest gift I could ever ask for. It's like going on a field trip. It's like, I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what anyone's thinking in the world. The closest I could ever get is when you do show and tell.
Right. That's kind of the same thing. That's with my interviews and that kind of thing. That's what kind of drove me to start doing it originally. It's people have stories and they want to tell them unfiltered. Why not give the platform to do that?
And why not and why not be the filter that finds truth in it? You know, that's what I love about film. It's one of the it's it's one of the few mediums that has to be collaborative.
Yeah.
Not many mediums are. You have to collaborate, and that collaboration opens so many beautiful things. Because I think of that statement you just said, and what's great about it is, you know, you could tell me the story of something you really love or something you've lost.
Yeah.
And in that story, there's something that hurts you or helps you in it.
Yeah.
And when I hear the story, I hear something else. So suddenly, if I'm on a film crew and I can collaborate with 5 or 10 people or 100 people, and we can all talk about how does this one idea make us feel, then we have a chance of making something that's universal that everyone can feel.
Right. Fantastic. All right. Well, Andrew, I think that's kind of the perfect note to end this on, man. That was absolutely fantastic. This has been a great interview. So before we kind of end things, I want to highlight your releases. You have Feral coming out on June 12th, correct?
Yes. We are so just so you know, when you edit together, you might have to record that line after. I'll get you the exact information.
For sure.
I'll probably know in the next few weeks where it'll be, but Feral's coming out and I'll let you know on the fair.
Perfect.
Well.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, once I get those, I'll kind of record those, but anything else that you'd like to harp on? You think we kind of covered it? Thank you so much for listening to my interview with Andrew Wonder. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to check out my other interviews on my channel. You can find Andrew's film Feral to be released on video on demand on June 2nd. You can also find their Instagram at Feral Film Project and Andrew's Instagram at Andrew Wonder. Andrew's website is andrewwonder.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be sure to catch you on the next one.